Hello and welcome to Scottish Football Daily. And on the first episode that we've got here on the channel, we have got a lot to get our teeth stuck into. Hearts have went out and signed Gavin Miller. Aberdeen have already been busy in and around the market. And there's a whole shopping list of stuff that's already happened across the league in the first 7 days in the aftermath of the 25-26 season. Once we've got this channel up and running and fully on its feet, we'll be doing daily live content covering all the latest comings and goings across the league. We'll be following Scotland on World Cup duty. And as we get into the 26-27 season proper on this channel, we'll be doing tons of match previews, predictions, as well as breakdown and analysis content. At any point in this video, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Get into the comment section and let me know your thoughts, feelings, and big takeaways from all the comings and goings that we're going to discuss in the video. Not just transfer, but a lot of stuff in the boardroom or in the back room, as it were, at the clubs and at the SFA as well. I'm really looking forward to covering all the clubs across the league in the 26-27 season here on the channel, and hopefully you guys enjoy the content that we do here. Hopefully if it grows and it becomes as good and as well received as I hope it is, then we can do some amazing content here on the channel, not just with maybe extra collaborations, but also if we get big enough and we grow the way we do, we could really change some of the content that's getting made on Scottish football and lift the level of it, as it were. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm very optimistic and hopeful that you guys enjoy the content that we bring here as well. And hopefully we could go on and do some pretty good stuff in the name of Scottish football. But yeah, let's just get stuck straight into this one because, like I say, we have news afoot already. Hearts, as I was setting up to record the video, having realised we weren't able to go live straight off the bat, have agreed a transfer deal for Falkirk winger Gavin Miller. Now, Gavin Miller had been hotly linked to Celtic in the January window, and I personally thought this was going to be an absolute shoe-in of a transfer for Celtic, given his homegrown status and how well he performed actually in the league. Gavin Miller showed himself this season to be a very formidable left winger, right winger, attacking midfielder, you name it, very versatile with very good takers, and this is a potentially huge coup for Hearts. And it's not because Gavin Miller is going to be a Ballon d'Or capable player or anything like that. But in the wake of Lawrence Shankland departure, we've also seen Frankie Kent, we've also seen Baningame, and we've also seen Alan Forrest and somebody else who I'm forgetting leave the club, as well as their head of football moving down to Luton, and a wee bit of a backroom change here around the goalkeeper coaching department with Gordon Marshall coming in and whatnot. But one of the big things about Hearts that everyone's been speaking about endlessly is the Tony Bloom investment, the Jamestown Analytics infrastructure that Hearts are assimilating into their being, as it were. And with the kind of little changes we've had in the back room here, where Hearts' historical head of recruitment is now out of the way, as it were, and I don't think he was necessarily an obstruction in the whole scheme of things. And I know Shankland is going to be a sore miss for Hearts fans. He was a hero, he was a captain for them, and that will be a story that I'm sure is going to rumble on for throughout his Rangers career, of course. Maybe some sort of rivalry will kind of bubble away from that. But if you look at the front line in particular for the Hearts squad as it stands right now, it very much looks a lot more like a Union Saint-Gilloise. It looks very much more like a Brighton type of front line. There's a lot of pace, there's a lot of versatility. And with a couple of signings getting added into this, in the form primarily of Gavin Miller, but also Josh McPake moving up from St Johnstone, who won promotion last year. They've also went and signed a defensive midfielder from the third tier of French football, Renaud, I think is how we're going to say his name. Mark Leonard last season was on loan, obviously had an ACL injury, but also a signing in the form of Kamsin Kamara. Now, this is a player, none of these players I really know too much about. I've done a little bit of digging around. Oh, Gavin Miller also we know quite well for who they are, what they're all about, etc. And Kamsin Kamara definitely comes in with a bit of a reputation that this is a player that really could lift the level of the Hearts defence, for as well as Halkett and Finlay were this year, very formidable. You can just feel that there was, and not to be too harsh, because I didn't watch Hearts week in, week out, as I'm sure lots of you guys were, but maybe just a little bit of an agricultural defensive nature to Hearts last year. And I suppose if they're bringing in more players that have been ID'd from their Jamestown Analytics, then this could be a really big defensive upgrade for them potentially, if it's someone that can not only carry the defensive responsibilities of Halkett, but if they maybe have an extra string to their bow, you could maybe see Hearts' backline make a bit of a development here. But between this guy Mato, I'm not sure how much he really featured for Hearts last year. I think he was injured, wasn't he? But Hearts have really now built up a really exciting front line of players that are very versatile, very fast. And yeah, Lawrence Shankland has a lot of goals. It leaves a bit of a vacuum out of this team so far, but we're only at point of recording at the 1st of June. And for this to be the body count as well as the quality that Hearts have now are kind of looking at here for their squad, I think these moves that they've made quite swiftly with Renaud essentially replacing Leonard, Camara essentially replacing Halkett. And I don't think you can quite think about Calvin Miller replacing Shankland necessarily, but with Braga being seen in central areas at times, that could be a development that happens kind of internally in the squad before they even go out and make any extra transfers on top of that. Maybe there's an extra bit of versatility you could see from some of these players that are designated as right wingers that we didn't maybe see as much last year. But Hearts, it feels like, are kind of kicking on a little bit here. They've wasted no time at all in acting fast in the market to get some obvious replacements to fill some holes in their squad. And I think you've got big qualifiers this summer. There's a lot of foot for Hearts, a very good first season in the 10-year plan that would have been laid out for them coming into this season ahead of schedule is I think how they're going to find it. And I think you can see from the early signs here that Hearts are going to capitalise on being ahead of schedule and are probably going to push the boat out or advance the plans up a couple of steps on what they maybe thought summer 2 or season 2 might have held for them. So I think this is a very positive start for Hearts. It really does a lot to reinforce their team if it doesn't maybe lift their level too much, but just kind of re-solidify it from what we've seen last year. Now, Aberdeen have also went out into the transfer market under new manager Stephen Robinson and made a triple substitution. They've signed Lewis Mayo, they've signed Brad Lyons, but on top of that, they've also went out and signed Alexander Briedl from Blau-Schweiz-Linz in the Austrian Bundesliga, an Austrian under-21 international who comes with a pretty good pedigree, it must be said. This is quite an interesting transfer from when I'm sitting, because Aberdeen over the last couple of seasons have had a really solid centre-back defensive midfield base whenever I've watched them play, certainly. And under new manager Stephen Robinson, his St Mirren team quite famously are very robust, let's say, very combative in midfield. So Brad Lyons, Lewis Mayo really do add into that. But this boy, Alexander Briedl, 24 years of age, actually has had a really good season in the Austrian Bundesliga. Now, Blau-Schweiz-Linz are one of the bottom half teams, typically speaking. So this is a team that are playing against the ball quite a lot. They don't dominate possession. Aberdeen would hope to think of themselves probably in a better situation, but the way last year went, they're actually kind of comparable to this Blau-Schweiz-Linz. This is a guy that loves getting involved in tackles, is a defensive duel monster. But if you look at his interceptions and tackles on top of that, this is a very combative defensive midfielder that looks like, to me, he will step into the Aberdeen team very, very well. And the boy Nielsen and Shinnie, like, again, they give as good as they get and they don't give anyone an inch, but they are missing a little bit of, let's just say, culture, for lack of a better expression. So a signing like this, Aberdeen have flirted with better quality players over the last couple of windows, and I do commend them for it. It is ambitious and you do like to see it and encourage it in Scottish football. But this one might be one of the smarter ones that they've done, where it's maybe not a guy coming on loan from AC Milan or anything fancy like that, Jesper Karlsson's, etc. But this could be a really effective signing. This is him versus other players in the Austrian league. He's in the 96th percentile for defensive duels won, which is very, very formidable. And then when we compare him against players in his position in all leagues that are available on this data website here, he still ranks in the top 97 percentile of defensive midfielders for defensive duel percentages that are won. Now, we've got two sets of stats down here for tackles and interceptions. The ones that are pad DJ, they are possession adjusted for teams that don't dominate the ball and teams that do. So it's like a level stat where you can look at two different players, one that plays for a dominant possession team and one that doesn't. And their stats, you can compare them and see objectively maybe who could be better at something. But I think for a team, for a player like this, it's not too relevant because, as you can see, his actual tackles, he's in the 60th percentile next to the Padge tackle. It's a minor difference, isn't it? So actual volume of tackles, and notably for the midfield, it's a bit better. Those interceptions, very, very good. We can also see progressive passing actually is quite high. And for defensive midfielders, that's very much a nice to have rather than an essential. And when you couple that up with the deal for Lewis Mayo as well as Brad Lyons, Aberdeen were missing a little bit of that last year. They definitely tried to add some glamour and lift the level of their squad, but they maybe at times looked a little bit lost at sea. They maybe struggled to get results over the line. And two things you can say, or one thing you can say about Brad Lyons and Lewis Mayo, the two players in question, both former Kilmarnock players, are they will give as good as they get and they will kind of battle. So some good squad additions there. And in the case of Briedl, could be a good level lifter for Aberdeen in the offing here. Another thing that we've had over the past week that I thought would be interesting to include in the video is a football update from St Mirren, where they update the fans on the club is still progressing with their appointment for the next manager. They're still going to be interviewing people and whatever. But the body of this is really to announce the new head of recruitment of Gavin Miller, who comes in from Motherwell after 5 years at the club. Now, Motherwell, of course, have been very much in the headlines this summer, but I think anyone that's been paying attention to Scottish football for the last 5 seasons or so would agree that Motherwell have done some really effective business throughout the time. They've always had like decent striker or two. If you even think back to, they've had a couple of guys come through their books or come through their doors that have turned out to be pretty handy players within the league. And Motherwell have done quite well to kind of have a little bit of a Moneyball effect with some of the buys and sells that they've done. Never mind the guys out of the academy. They've recruited quite well, even you think domestically, guys like O'Donnell and McGinn, etc. So I think this is actually a really good appointment from St Mirren, who I think they also made a bit of a change in the backroom or in the boardroom somewhere else, maybe a month or two ago. They won the League Cup this year, and they have been threatening St Mirren to try and like level up their operations. And I don't say that in a derogatory way, but they are now realizing that they're close to a bit of a ceiling for how well run they are. Stephen Robinson, I think, did a great job there. I think Goodwin wasn't too bad for them either for a couple of seasons. And they're now looking at compounding some success over the last couple of years and try and move them on a level. So getting someone in from Motherwell with the track record that they've had in recent years, I think is a huge statement of intent from St Mirren, by the way. Let's see what happens at Motherwell in the absence of Gavin Miller and Jens Bertolascu. That makes that all the more interesting now, I think, as well. The next manager, you've got to think Gavin Miller's probably going to play a hand in that as well. And with some of the managerial appointments that Motherwell have even had in recent years, like that's probably quite an encouraging sign for them as well. So we'll keep a close eye on that. And also in other news from the last week or so, Craig Mulholland has been appointed Chief Football Officer of the SFA. And this was announced Wednesday the 27th. And I don't really know too much about Craig Mulholland other than what's detailed in the statement here from the SFA. But he's taken over the CFO role from Andy Gould, who's somebody that I do know. Andy Gould was one of the tutors, one of the coaches when I was doing my UEFA B license about 10 years ago or whatever it was. Very good guy, very good coach, knows his onions. There's just no two ways about it. And he's taken a job with FIFA after 30 years of association with the SFA. This article, you can read it in the fullest. You can pause the video if you want to. But this is a change of personnel, and it's not down to any change, it feels like, from the SFA. It just feels like Andy Gould has done so well at whatever he's doing specifically for the SFA that he's getting a nice big job at FIFA, and we wish Andy all the best there. And let's hope he can maybe help Scottish football from his new position up at FIFA, as it were. But Craig Mulholland has definitely got big shoes to fill here. And with the background he has, it's quite clear what his role is going to be at the SFA, or what they feel that his core responsibilities are going to be in terms of developing the game, not only at youth level, but also the women's game, and really bringing a lot of stuff up to speed. And this is a kind of side topic or a sub kind of plot that I hope to follow here on the channel, because Scotland getting to this World Cup is the first summer in however many years it is now, 28 or whatever, that the SFA are going to get proper money for Scotland being at a World Cup or being at a tournament. And investment in grassroots, investment in the game from top to bottom has never been more badly needed, is probably the best way of saying that there. But also SFA have now got really the funding and really a lack of excuses for getting a lot of stuff done here. So Craig Mulholland, if he's in charge of some of this stuff, we could see some really nice and interesting changes, lifting the level of the game in Scotland to some of the, let's say, the benchmarks and the KPIs of maybe some of the former places where he's worked as well. So we'll watch on with that. And the only kind of news we've had in the Scotland camp over the last couple of days or the last week or so, as we get the first video on the channel done and dusted and in the can, as it were, was Billy Gilmour's injury ruling him out of the tournament, and the inclusion of Man United youngster, Scotland legend Darren Fletcher's son, Tyler Fletcher, has been added into the squad for the World Cup. So good to see that. I'm not sure we're going to see him actually play at the World Cup, but that move has happened. So we'll talk about it. There's been a few other little threads and rumours that have taken place over the last week or so, but for the first video on the channel, I just wanted to talk about the main news over the last week or so, since the end of the season, since the Scottish Cup final that have happened over the last week. It's quite good to get on the channel to start off some of the conversations, some of the threads, some of the topics that we're going to be following all the way through the summer. We'll be back on the channel tomorrow to pick up with everything that's happened in the last 24 hours on Scottish Football Daily. I hope you've enjoyed the content. Please do hit subscribe to support the channel for more content like this. Hit the like button if you did enjoy it, of course, and get into the comment section and let me know your thoughts, feelings, and big takeaways. Stay out of trouble, and I'll catch you on the next one.